Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're letting people in this morning. And we're reminding people, get your coffee, get your water. It's bright and early this morning and, pre-daylight savings time. So we want to make sure you're comfortable. We invite you, as we're letting people in, to tell us who you are through chat, who you are and why you're here. Introduce yourselves, who you're connected to, as we're waiting for people to join us. Give us your information through our chat line. Buenos dias, welcome everybody. People are slowly logging in. Tell us who you are on the chat. Buenos dias, welcome. I see, let's see. I see Dr. Gail Newell. I see Randa Solik. I see Rebecca Garcia. I see Amanda Gamban. I see Jessica Serna from our board. I see Steve from UCSC. Hi, Steve. Good to see you. I see Diane and Emily and Miriam and Lupe. Welcome, everybody. Claire and Gabi, Danny. El abuelo de Hannah Rogers, bienvenido. I love it. Oh, it's good to see your faces this morning. My goodness. Hi, Jessica. I see you from Packard. Where are you, Jessica? There you are. I see you. Welcome. Good morning. Delia. Welcome. Good morning. We have a great list of guests with us this morning. Please, as you come, tell us who you are, your name and who you're connected to. Good morning, Lizette and Linda. I see Dory. Buenos dias, Dory. Bienvenida.
Buenos días a todos.
Buenos días. Please join us. Tell us who you are on the chat. We're excited to have you here this morning. It's a cloudy morning in Watsonville, and I understand we expect rain later today. But boy, are we lucky to have you with us this morning. It's a busy time for everybody, and you decided to join us this morning, so thank you for that.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. As Maria Elena mentioned, please introduce yourselves using the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to walk us through very quickly for those of you that may still need some support with Zoom and interpretation. I'm just going to walk us through. Buenos días. Por favor, si pueden hacer una introducción usando el chat. Esta mañana tenemos interpretación en español disponible. Entonces, nada más voy a dar un breve repaso de cómo acceder la interpretación por medio de Zoom. Y buenos días, mi nombre es Paulina Moreno. Soy una de las directoras aquí con Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County. So, les recordamos que esta mañana tenemos interpretación en español y pueden seleccionar usando el icono de interpretación en su pantalla para seleccionar español. Of course, the event will be taking place in English, but if you would like to listen to the presentation in Spanish, we are going to have interpretation. Si están usando su tableta o celular, hay también una manera donde pueden seleccionar su idioma y aquí les demostramos bien brevemente cómo pueden seleccionar el modo usando Language Interpretation y seleccionando el idioma en español para poder acompañarnos esta mañana en español. Y por último, les vamos a pedir a todos que por favor mantengan su en mudo mientras la conferencia está pasando, pero los invitamos a hacer preguntas usando el chat. Y también va a haber una oportunidad donde vamos a escuchar de todos. Entonces, para poner su teléfono en mudo es el asterisco número 6 para desactivar y activar. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our welcoming group. Thank you. María Elena? Oh, good.
Buenos dias again. Good morning to everyone. It is great to see you with us today. I want to thank you for taking time this morning to come and join us in this important conversation around the Thriving Immigrants Collaborative and the work that we have collectively done in support and in service to the immigrant community in our county for over a year. Show me by your reactions, like give me a thumbs up if you were part of the convergence a little over a year ago. Anybody on the Zoom today were part of the convergence a little over a year ago. We see some thumbs up there. And I will tell you, that was the last community event before shelter in place. And if you can remember the impact of that gathering, it started with the drumming. Do you all remember the drumming that we felt in every part of our body and our spirit? It was incredibly intense to start the conference with that kind of energy and spirit. And then we had these amazing speakers, right? Amazing speakers who asked us to lean in. Remember how raw we were? Do you remember we were talking about children being separated at the border? We were talking about the anti-immigrant rhetoric. We were talking about the ugliness of the government rhetoric against immigrants at that time. Do you remember? And we were asked to lean into the pain. And I remember there were very few dry eyes in that auditorium. It was an incredible experience for us to come together, to know that we had to be better and do better for our immigrant community. We knew it. And we had over 200 people commit to do something different. And so today, a little over a year later, we are here to tell you what has transpired in a really difficult year. What have we been able to do pushing through the challenges of COVID and fires in our community? And so I want to welcome you. I want to celebrate that we're here today, celebrating over a year ago of a really difficult year, that our community is standing, that we are still standing, and that we have a lot of work to do going forward. And so with that, welcome. Thank you to our Thriving Immigrants Steering Committee. Thank you to our Thriving Immigrants Leadership, Paulina and Hannah, and those steering committee members who have been with us every step of the way, pushing this work forward. And thank you to our partners for showing up today, because we are not at the end of anything. We are continuing the journey, and today is about recommitting, understanding lessons learned, and continuing to commit to do better and be better for our immigrant community. And with that, I want to welcome Emily Bali to the first part of our segment. You know, the county has been with us every step of the way. Emily Bali, I'm sure everybody on this call knows who Emily is. Over 30 years of service in our county system. You know, she is committed to make a difference, to be a true advocate and servant to our community, and has ensured our continued responsivity to immigrant needs locally. You know what, Emily, you have done it creatively, you have done it with innovation, and you have led with your heart, and we are so incredibly grateful for your partnership, Emily. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias, bon dia. I'm honored to be here this morning on behalf of the Human Services Department, as well as the proud daughter of immigrant parents. You know, you got me, Maria Elena, with reflecting on the last year. And in the Human Services Department, we saw the impact that climate of fear created for our families. We saw people opt out of critical food assistance, health coverage, employment services. And as we entered the pandemic, that world as we knew, how our world changed as we knew it, we recognized the value and the work of the Thriving Immigrant Collaborative, because although we are human services and we are still government, and the rhetoric, how immigrants were vilified by our federal government, really, we knew there was some trust lost, and we knew we still need to rely on our trusted messengers who have those relationships with our community, to help people know what they're eligible for. We know that we are not those trusted messengers, even though with all our heart we believe we want people to access those services. So the last year just really reinforced for us the work that the collaborative does and all of you do in the community. Particularly for us, I think for me as the daughter of immigrants, that has always represented courage, hope, and resilience. And really the work we all will continue to do will be to advocate for those policies and strategies that regardless of where you came from, you feel welcomed, valued, and supported. And that's really what we want for everyone in our community. And we just really want to continue to work together to lift up the voices of immigrants. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge it's not only changing policies and strategies, it's changing hearts and minds. Because as I was watching the news this morning, I could, just the impact of hearing what's happening to our Asian American neighbors and Asian immigrants, it just really hits home that it's not just policies, it's hearts and minds we need to work on together. So but I also want to say that there's things we're hopeful about. The recent developments on DACA and public charge that I know we're going to hear more about later today, really I'm really hopeful that together we can move forward TIC's values of dignity, justice, and equity. And with that, because I am an emotional wreck this morning, apparently, I really welcome you all to today's forum. And I'm so thrilled to be here with you all and see everyone. It's great to see everyone again. And with that, I will turn it over to Latino Affairs Commissioner Rebecca Hernandez.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Emily. I'm speaking with you today from the city of Santa Cruz, the traditional homelands of the Amamutsan Tribal Band. I'm honored to be here representing the Santa Cruz County Latino Affairs Commission. Our commission was established to monitor and advise the County Board of Supervisors on significant issues impacting the Santa Cruz County Latino community. As you all know, the events of 2020 have brought the need for Latino representation in county government into sharp focus. Historically, the immigrant population has been the most underrepresented and vulnerable segment of our community. But the pandemic greatly magnified the impact of systematic inequalities, resulting in serious consequences for immigrants. The issues being discussed here today are more important than ever, and the Latino Affairs Commission is honored to be a part of the effort. Beginning today's program is the Community Action Board and Thriving Immigrant Coalition 2020 Impact Panel. Anita Aguirre, TIC Steering Committee member with Salud para la Gente, will introduce members of the panel. Thanks all.
Thank you so much. So as Rebecca shared, my name is Anita Aguirre, and I'm the Deputy Director and Chief Compliance Officer with Salud para la Gente. And I have the honor of moderating this first section of our of our convergence for today. Anyhow, so today we are here to provide you with an update on what the Thriving Immigrant Collaborative agencies have done to address immigrant communities, COVID-19, and the challenges of 2020. The Thriving Immigrants Collaborative works towards our mission, both via individual agency initiatives and collective action. In addition to hearing from the collaborative's founding agencies in this panel, we have also created a 2020 impact report that we will send to you for today's event as a follow-up over the next couple of days. Today, we will focus on two questions. The first being, what has been your agency's greatest impact on the immigrant community during 2020 since the start of the pandemic? And then, what lessons did you learn in this process that you believe are important for others to keep in mind when serving the immigrant community in 2021 and beyond? And so today we will hear from the leaders of Pajaro Valley Prevention and Student Assistance, Catholic Charities, the Watsonville Law Center, Salud para la Gente, Monarch Services, Community Bridges, and the Community Action Board. And each panelist will have 2 minutes, and I have the job of being timekeeper. And so with that, I'd like to begin with PVPSA. And so if you could introduce yourself, your name, agency, and your position, and respond to this one question. What has been your agency's greatest impact on the immigrant community during 2020 since the start of the pandemic? Erica?
Anita, we might need to start with someone else. I believe she's joining from.
That is not a problem.
Never happened.
Okay. Is Catholic Charities online?
I am here.
Oh, wonderful. There's Anna.
I decided not to drive anywhere so I could be here because I wanted to make sure I was here. So thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Thriving Immigrants Collaborative, Maria Elena, Paulina. We have 2 minutes and that's pretty tough to do. But, my name is Ana Ventura Ferris. I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Charities. We serve 4 counties and we're proud to be here with you all. We serve Santa Cruz County. And in this area, what was the greatest impact? Oh my God, well, we remained open because nonprofits that serve people that are low income are essential businesses. So I just want to start with that because we were essential too. And the reason why we were essential just shows this whole past year of all the amazing work we did helping immigrants. And so when we found out about the closures, people started coming just like all of you, 5 times more calls, people knocking on doors. I suddenly lost my job. I have no eligibility for unemployment. I don't have a stimulus check. How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to pay rent? Crying at the doors. So we, while the government figured it out, because I know it takes a while, we got together and with funders, with UndocuFund, with our donors, with other people that of similar beliefs that we had to help those that weren't eligible for any money and had absolutely nothing. They were borrowing from friends. So what did we do? We decided to prioritize people that were undocumented, had no eligibility for anything else. And we provided, just like CAB and others, we provided rent assistance to hundreds of families in Santa Cruz County. We provided utility assistance. We provided food cards for those that were in non-traditional rental contracts. So we gave them debit cards for that. We worked with people like Ruby Vasquez to give 4,000 masks out to people in the fields. I also want to say that they also, shifted and we adopted the technology of Zoom and calls and screenshots, and the children of immigrants helped their parents, do this, with, taking the screenshots of rent contracts, of applications and all this, and it all worked out. There was so much need out there, but I think, we did make an impact, and I leave you, I'm at the end of my 2 minutes, but I want to end it that we we shifted that technology, we adopted it, they adopted it, and we were able to continue our services and provide, 5 times more than we would have ever dreamed of doing that, when we were here a year ago. And I leave you with one person that when we did a farm worker caravan for the San Jose people that came to deliver food in Pájaro, a man looked at the trucks and all the people and they said, "Thank you for remembering us." He said, "The people are remembering us. Thank you so much for remembering us without jobs, without anything." And we had been working in hotels and restaurants, and we got sick from farm working in the farms with people, in dense housing, but thank you for remembering us. So, that's how I end it, because it was so powerful for me.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the work that you're doing, and that is Catholic Charities. That was beautiful. Next, we're going to hear from Watsonville Law Center. Is Lizette on the line?
Yes, good morning. How come my name again? I'm here. I know you got
Great.
now.
Lizette, if you could answer the same question, what has been your agency's greatest impact on the immigrant community during 2020 and the start of the pandemic?
Yes, thank you, Anita. So my name is Lisa Rodriguez Peña. I'm from the Watsonville Law Center. I'm their immigration and employment staff attorney. And even though I've been with the Watsonville Law Center for a short period of time, I've been involved in the Santa Cruz community for the past 2 years. And as an organization with the Watsonville Law Center, we resisted becoming part of the systematic oppression and injustice by educating and empowering our clients and staff who are also impacted by the same forces as our immigrant communities, and ourselves are fighting through this at the same time. So we empower them to use their voices and rights. And one of the things we did, we educated and provided direct representation to undocumented workers affected by COVID-19 who were terminated from their work after being COVID-19 positive or were denied their wages without any justification. So we also enforce the rights of public benefits such as SDI, state disability insurance, and paid family leave, regardless of their immigration status, with the collaboration of our healthcare partners, Salud para la Gente. We also successfully identify and institutionalize immigration as a social determinant of health by addressing any expressed fears that immigrant communities, such as Indigenous speaking pregnant women, address with their health providers and provide legal assistance for patients and clients to continue with the medical care. Because as Emily mentioned, many people started to opt out because of the whole public charge, and then additional to COVID, it created a fear to continue with medical care. So we were able to address those fears and directly represented the individual with the immigration matter. I think one of that stories that stick with me was this pregnant woman. She's Indigenous, and she was wearing an ankle monitor, and she was about to give birth. And obviously the ankle monitor creates a lot of risk, because if she has to get a C-section, that interferes with the medical procedures. So she was about 3 days to be due, and she came to us, and we were able to somehow I think it's a miracle, because we've been trying to get other ankle monitors removed. We were able to remove this ankle monitor, and not only remove it for the surgery, but we were able to remove it for the entire time. So as of now, this individual, even though she's in deportation proceedings, no longer has the ankle monitor that reminds her every day of the struggles that she's been going through and went through to be able to get to this place. And I mean, that for us, that's a big success, and it shows that there is a lot more work to be done, but at least we changed a life at that moment, and we continue to just provide some advocacy and empower those individuals regardless of their immigration status, for them to not fear to seek medical assistance, food assistance, and in general, legal representation, because a lot of the community even fears that. When we do consultations, not myself, as soon as I mention immigration consultation, I really need to be careful because that creates a fear and brings so many memories that has impacted their lives. So I think I'm out of time, but thank you all.
Thank you, Lizette. Thank you for the work you do and the work of Watsonville Law Center. We're next going to move on to Salud para la Gente and to Dory. And Dory, if you could answer that same question, what has been your agency's greatest impact on the immigrant community during 2020 since the start of the pandemic?
Good morning, buenos días. I'm Dory Rosinda, CEO of Salud para la Gente. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thumbs up. So just for context, Salud para la Gente provides healthcare. Our patients, we have about 28,000 patients, which is about half of the community in Watsonville. And most of those patients are either immigrants or second generation immigrants. And so all of what we do is impactful to the immigrant community. The very first week of COVID a year ago, we began opening 7 days a week so that those who are working Monday through Saturday still had access to medical care on Sundays. We also immediately created outside clinic space for COVID testing and COVID care so that people could remain healthy and know whether or not they were sick. That was true on Sundays as well. Testing was available. We pivoted to telehealth, meaning we could help people stay home or
Did we lose Dory? She's probably buffering. We'll give her a moment. Oh, the fun world of Zoom and internet and
It's part of the reminder of what we've all been up to last year.
Can you guys hear me?
Yay.
Yay, there you are.
So my computer says your PC ran into a problem. It's just collecting information and will shut down and restart soon. So hello, I'm back. I'll try to pick up where I left off, and I'm now on paper notes. Luckily, I had printed them out and not just looking at the computer. Let's see. I think I was talking about pivoting to telehealth so that people were able to stay home and access the doctor and healthcare, or stay at work and not miss work and still access care. We partnered with Santa Cruz County Public Health and with UCSC, their molecular diagnostic lab, to ensure that COVID testing was available easily in language and with rapid results. We were able to test in 2020 over 8,000 people in the community that way. And we did that really targeting our patients and also the patients of the small medical practices in South County who didn't have the resources to do testing themselves. More recently, we created a BAM clinic, or a monoclonal antibody infusion clinic, which is the infusion treatment for someone who's very high risk of hospitalization or severe illness, to be able to have the same treatment that, if you remember, Trump had when he got COVID, that really helps people recover quickly. So we have that clinic on site and available to our community. And we, as quickly as possible, moved into vaccinating, making sure that thousands of our community members have had access to vaccination as quickly as possible. In addition, we've been partnering, closely with Santa Cruz, the Public Health Department, also to make sure that tracing services were available, meaning that when someone was tested positive, we would help investigate anyone who may have been exposed and to inform them and make sure that they were informed with how to care for themselves and how to prevent exposure from further COVID transmission. We also were able to really stay abreast of a lot of frequent phone calls that were public health would share, and through the other healthcare providers, to make sure we were all always up to speed on the latest, which the latest changed daily, sometimes multiple times during the day. Outside of direct clinic services, we partnered with the Watsonville Law Center to make sure that our patients who had immigration issues or questions about immigration during COVID had access to legal advice and assistance. We communicated internally through, we added on a text blast system so that we could get COVID information out quickly to our 28,000 patients. And then we sat at the table and partnered with the Save Lives, Pajaro Valley Save Lives community group, which I think you'll probably hear more about in a little bit, where the city, agriculture, education, healthcare, and key CBOs all sat together with the expertise of communication to make sure our community received targeted information that empowered them to make good decisions and have the information they needed to protect themselves, to protect their families during COVID. They worked really hard constantly through this year and continue to do so with the changing information coming out. And I think that was a very powerful impact on the community and kept people safe. We also partnered with Community Ventures to ensure that, as Anna was talking about, those who were not eligible for other benefits during COVID had cash aid to help pay for essential needs like rent, et cetera, through a DocuFund. I believe we were able to assist in distributing 2.3 million, maybe even more, $2.3 million through that partnership. And a longtime partner, we continue to work with Second Harvest to make sure that people had access to food throughout COVID. We also targeted some of our most vulnerable patients who have chronic illness to make sure they had food and medication delivered to their homes so they could stay home and stay safe. And we partnered with CAB and Caravanas to head out to farms and make sure farm workers had the information that they needed, again, to stay informed during COVID and to access care and services. And we sat at the table and partnered with the South County Triage as well. So those are the ways in which I'm sure I've left some things out, but we partnered to impact the immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dory, for sharing the work at Salud. Is PVPSA on the call?
I am. Hi, Anita. Hi,
Oh,
everybody.
there you are, Erica. Wonderful. Good to see you.
Great
Erica,
to see
if you could also introduce yourself and share with us your agency's greatest impact on the immigrant community during 2020 and at the start of the pandemic.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. I apologize that I was a little late. My name is Erica Padilla Chavez. I'm the CEO of Pajaro Valley Prevention and Student Assistance. And what a great event, Maria Elena. Congratulations to you and your team for putting this together. As we have an opportunity to do some reflecting of what we've learned and what we've been able to do together during this pandemic. I'm very happy to report also, as Dory I heard you, Dory, talk about our partnership approach to the delivery of services in our respective organizations. And much like Dory shared, and I'm not sure who else spoke before, but you know, there's no way that our delivery of support and services to the families we serve at PVPSA could have happened without the partnership and the leveraging of resources that we were able to bring into our organization. At PVPSA, our mission is to provide quality of care services through the delivery of behavioral health services for children and youth and their families who reside in the Pajaro Valley. As you can imagine, the needs for social emotional supports during this time has been, you know, just so vast and so multifaceted in need. PVPSA early on had to pivot to figure out how to continue providing these vital services to the children and the youth and their families in a community that we know suffered greatly and continues to deal with digital divide issues. So how do you provide that through a telehealth medium? But our team very quickly, in partnership with the guidance that public health has been sharing with all healthcare sectors, we realized that in order for us to ensure the health and the well-being of the children and the families who didn't have a means to connect through telehealth, we needed to continue to provide care in our facilities. So we quickly had to pivot and modify our facilities so that we could welcome and receive these children and families. I'm sure many of you have heard of all the behavioral health needs that our children and youth are facing. We have seen an escalation of crisis. We have seen an escalation of self-harm and suicidal ideation among our children and youth. But I'm very proud that our team has acted in a very responsive way to meet the needs of children. We do home visitations. So we work in partnership with the school district. And when a child does not report to class using their digital devices, they've got a PVPSA case manager knocking on the door. Why? Because we care about the children and the youth. We want to know what is happening. Do you need support? How can we help you? And many of the children and families of the PVUSD school district are daughters and sons of immigrants. So we recognize firsthand the challenges that many of these young people have in their lives, knowing that their families are struggling financially, perhaps having to leave them unattended at home so that they can provide for their family. So we've been there to provide them with that support and to remind them that they're not alone. And I just can't say that it's definitely not the leaders of the organizations. We're there to support and encourage our teams to do the work. But I'm just very delighted with not just the work of the team, but the partnerships. We've also partnered up with UndocuFund during this process. We were able to give over $2 million of financial assistance to our children and families through both the UndocuFund and other philanthropic resources, the Community Foundation being one of them. So, you know, I just have to say the health and the well-being of the children and families we serve. Many of you in this Zoom today are partly responsible for maintaining their health and well-being. So I want to thank you for your partnership. And we know that when it comes to the social emotional needs of children, we're not out of the woods. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but I trust that we will continue to meet that task in partnership with the many organizations we work with, including Save Lives and including the South County COVID Triage Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, so much for sharing the work and for serving children and families of the community. Our next set of panelists are going to answer a slightly different question. They are going to respond to the prompt, what lessons did you learn in this process that you believe are important for others to keep in mind when serving the immigrant community in 2021 and beyond? And so we're first going to hear from Monarch Services. Is Leanne on?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Leanne Luna. Hi, Maria Elena. And I am a program manager with Monarch. Thank you so much for having us this morning. So in answer to your question, in terms of lessons learned, so I think one of the things, and so just like so many of you have mentioned here on this call, you know, we have been able to provide during this time of COVID, rental assistance, you know, client aid, weekly groceries, cash cards for groceries, tech support, all of those things and more. But I think, you know, I was really reviewing this yesterday with one of our co-executive directors, and I think this is something that we have been able to provide to folks even before COVID, right? Rental assistance and things like that. But I think what COVID has really done is just magnified the need for these services in an amazing, like a huge way, and the inequity amongst our immigrant community and even other, you know, folks within our community. But the inequity has been just amazing, right? And so the fact that we have been able to provide, I mean, I can give you a number, and I was sharing this with Hannah earlier in the week, is we've been able to provide over $260,000 in housing support. We have never, ever been able to do that, of course, because we don't have the resources within our own you know, umbrella to do that. But because of partnerships like UndocuFund, you know, Community Foundation, Sunlight Foundation, Office of Emergency Services, we have been able to do that. And so I think another really important thing is that the, not so much lesson learned, I mean, it does, I think, fall under that, but the importance of collaboration with our community partners, like so many of you on this call, we would have never been able to do that, right? I mean, we worked really closely with CAB in order to work on, to be able to provide this through a DocuFund. And so I think that has been really, really, really important. Also, I think the thing that was really important is that other things that have been magnified throughout this time, and I hope I'm not running into my 2-minute time limit yet, but is the safety planning, how important that's been amongst our community, because so our numbers alone have been through the roof, right? And so we've all been able to work remotely this entire time. And so we, as an agency have been really flexible, and I just really grateful for our staff who have been able to, to do that with their time and their work schedules and having young ones at home all at the same time. But our work is so important and everybody is so committed. And because the abuse has been so much more severe during this time, especially, that has come out, and that's for the adults, right, that I'm talking about. And so the safety planning has been really, really important. But on the other hand, one of the things, and I would say, I don't know that I have the answer to this, but I can speak to a little bit about, what Erica was sharing earlier, is that because we were not in the schools the way that we normally would, right, in person, and having those contact, and then the students were not in contact with administrators and teachers. So that was a big fear of ours, that a lot of the things that were happening at home were not being addressed, right? Those things were just kind of left happening during this whole time. And so now that we've been able to tailor our services a bit more and be out with law enforcement and respond to some of these calls that we had been prior to COVID, those things are coming out again. And so I think that's something to just really put on folks' radar, is that how do we then address those things? So that's a lot of really wonderful things that have come out of this, but still some things, I think that we can always improve and do better on.
Thank you so much, Leanne, for sharing your lessons of the last year and going forward. We're next going to hear from Community Bridges with the same question of what did you learn in this process that you believe are important for others to keep in mind when serving the immigrant community? Ray?
Morning, everybody. Ray Cancino from CEO of Community Bridges. So, first off, I think a lot of people have covered it. It's collaboration, not competition. So there's a special call out to those partners that made that happen. Ventures and Maria, Department of Public Health, Mimi, Jen, and Jennifer Pham, as well as Gail, Human Services Division, Emily, Community Foundation, Stacy, Susan, and Erica, also for chairing the Pajaro Valley Saves and doing a lot of the work to put us all together in a position to better respond. I think the second big piece from you have to start from the back end and have the resources to be able to respond to a lot of these needs, is to work with funders that believe in you to get your ideas off the ground. It only takes one of them to basically believe in your idea, and the rest will follow. That happened in many different ways. So, if any funders are looking for new ideas, we have one which is the Immigrant Defense Fund project, that people have kind of talked about the need and the gap in having those resources for not only citizenship conversations, but we're talking tenant landlord issues, we're talking wage and claims issues, things where unfortunately there's a missing gap that we are looking to try to figure out how to fill. And those partners that people have mentioned, Sunlight Giving, 1440 Foundation, and Community Foundation in Santa Cruz, I think each one of them actually were the first in different projects for us, and then some of them followed after and kind of combined to leverage moving things forward. I think the other thing that is really important for organizations to just recognize is a little bit what Leanne was speaking to, was the inequities and social structural racism that exists ongoing in our systems that we all have to play into. We have to recognize that, unfortunately, when the state is rolling out vaccinations, they're thinking English first, and then Spanish or other indigenous languages are, 3 months out. And so as service providers that have capacity for the bilingual component, it's our job to be responsive and quickly responsive to the cultural needs and implications of making sure that the information is provided basically as soon as possible to everybody, so no one gets a jump. providing and putting together things like the vaccination helpline to specifically target Spanish speaking and putting it forward and prioritizing in order to basically leverage against the structural racism that exists in everyday things. So I think that there's important work that continues to be done around figuring out how to address these issues. So what I would propose people to do is to think about and to focus, identify the inequities that exist around new programs or issues that are being faced, and create programs that specifically undermine that inequity or provide kind of the ladder of the stepping stone of looking over the fence when you think of that equity image in your head. So provide those steps so people can have a better chance of having a fair opportunity across the board. I think another focus and aspect is that sometimes social service agencies and nonprofits and government speak to their silos and really sometimes get stuck in like, oh, we'll just send it out to our existing clients and the people we're already serving. But what we learned this year is definitely you have to invest in the people you're not serving and the people you're not reaching out to. And you have to have the money and resources to do that by doing general things like radio ads, social media investment, on the ground support. So paying somebody to stay outside of a Latin market or a Latinx market or a Mexican market, however you want to phrase it. We're going through a transitioning from Latinx to Latin, and we can have a separate conversation about that around that. So just wanted to preface that conversation as well in your organizations. But I think it's just important that you're constantly learning and constantly trying to expand people you're connected with, because sometimes the people that you are already in your circle would get the already traditional message. And what we're talking about is really addressing the most marginalized or the people outside of what we would call our community, right? Those people that are in our community but are unseen or unaddressed, and trying to figure out ways in which we can bring them into those services. I think that one thing that we also had to understand is that when you have not a requirement, but a public health directive that you have to stay away from people and you can't meet with other people in person, it makes it really hard to deliver services. And so, for us as an organization, we had to take those values and had to figure out how can we do it safely. So we actually stayed open. So I think for us, a lot of organizations actually closed down and prevented that one-on-one connection with folks, which I think was sometimes harder and detrimental for some folks that are not inclined to call or talk over the phone, or people that are shy and are already asking for help. Like, that's already a big step for them. And having a phone call or asking them to do something else kind of deterred people from actually accessing services. And so we wanted to address that by making sure we remained open. And so we did things like having our services outside in the cold, doing things that we had to do to be safe while at the same time still provide that client service as much as we could, as well as some of the other things that people described, which is trying to address digital divide issues by providing free hardware to seniors through our Senior Center Without Limits, specifically targeting Latin families, and then also working and providing the hardware side or the training side as well with our partners from the city of Santa Cruz and Gray Bears technical support team, as well as doing kind of the preemptive work that our family resource centers did a lot last year through a CPUC grant, which was providing digital literacy workshops and providing individuals how to use the internet, how to access, at that point in time, it was more about children's report cards and medical records, but all that became like a regular form in practice. And so I think continuing to try to educate those folks that are falling behind on a digital divide, especially in this new space where everything just kind of flipped and people were forced into it, was critically important for us to think about. How do we continue to educate those folks that are still behind and still needing the phone call assistance or the walk-in assistance, and getting them the resources they need in the future so they are able to also partake in doing safety opportunities at home. So I think those are the things that kind of came to mind when we thought about it.
Thanks so much, Ray. And I certainly agree with the sentiment as we are all hearing that collaboration during the last year has been just so key. And so thank you for your contributions. Last but But certainly not least, we're going to hear from Maria Elena from Community Action Board.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you to our Thriving Immigrants partners for the sharing of this wisdom. I have three areas that I just wanted to reiterate and or offer in lessons learned in our response. The first lesson is a story that I tell a lot in terms of when shelter in place hit and the impacts on our day worker center community. From one day to the next, on March 12th and March 13th, there was zero income revenue for our day workers. And for us, that was a call to action to help support and help elevate the narrative of the day worker center. And I want to say that one of the lessons learned is the strength of the community response. That day, I remember calling Susan True from Community Foundation and just saying, Susan, what are we going to do? And that the next day, having some resources to help provide support to that community. And since then, because of the partnership with Community Foundation, because of the partnership with the state of California, because of our generous donors and philanthropy partners, because of our county partners, and because of UndocuFund, we've been able to pass through over $4 million to help with economic relief. That is a lesson learned. Response, quick response, and elimination of barriers for that response. Absolutely critical. My second lesson learned is how we use the term trusted messenger. Everybody on this call, we have 85 people on this call, and I'm going to say every one of us are trusted messengers in this community. Every one of us work in service and respond to the community that we serve, right? And we know that term trusted messenger got elevated through the census work, right? Remember, a year ago, we were still doing census, right? And the importance of the role of the trusted messenger, right? The importance of the role of those of us in community-based organizations to help support our government partners in the work. I want to say that elevation of that role as trusted messenger has not gone away. The need for it has been elevated, right? And I want to say that the lesson learned that trusted messengers are there with our hearts and our arms open. And the lesson learned here, what we're hearing is the need for resources to help support the continuance of that work, right? We want to be partners. We have people in place to respond, and sometimes the resources aren't there. And so the lesson learned is to be able to normalize that conversation. How do we normalize the conversation that we need to invest in our trusted messengers, that it's not a competition, that it's a partnership? And I think the third lesson learned is as Ray and many others eloquently put, the disparities showed up, right, in the communities of color in our response. Disparities showed up. And how do we ensure that right now, because we know it, we hear it from Dr. Newell, and we hear it from Mimi and our public health partners, we're getting optimistic. We're optimistic in our recovery, right? We're in red tier and we're going to be in orange, right? Hurrah, yes. And how do we ensure that the disparities that showed up at the beginning of this pandemic do not continue to show up in the recovery of this pandemic? How do we ensure that our community, who tells us 97% of our community had reduced or eliminated work hours, 97% of our immigrant community had reduced or eliminated work hours? How do we ensure that their recovery is at equal pace as our English-speaking community? How do we ensure? We learned that 93% of our community had issues with housing, rental assistance, staying housed. How do we ensure that the recovery is at equal pace for our Spanish and Indigenous speaking community as it is for our English community? And how do we ensure that the recovery is at the same pace for access to healthcare services and access to vaccine? Those are the lessons learned. We learned that the pace is different for communities who speak Spanish, and even more different for communities of indigenous speaking languages. How are we committed to keep the recovery at the same pace? And that is going to continue to require advocacy. It's going to continue to require uncomfortable conversations, and it's going to continue to require a level of commitment to collaboration to move us through. Those are our lessons learned, along with everything else that has been shared with this incredible panel. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Here's to uncomfortable conversations, right? So thank you for that. So I just want to thank all of our panelists for their time, sharing the work of their agencies, and also for the collective work of the Thriving Immigrant Collaborative. We are now going to have a 3-minute break. And so if you will just put yourself on mute, you can get up and take a stretch or get something to drink, and we will be resuming shortly. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to stretch your legs, think about all of the amazing work that we heard about this morning. Buenos dias, my name is Hannah Rogers. I've had the pleasure of working for CAB's immigration team for the past 2 years. And I've gotten to see firsthand some of the incredible work that we just heard about on this 20-minute panel, which just to say we could never capture it all in that amount of time, right? There's been so much dedicated response that I've witnessed this past year. And I wanted to take a moment to honor and invite the voices of others here today who are helping advance immigrants' rights in our area, in our community. Just looking through the list of participants, the faces that I can see through Zoom, I know for a fact, I know for sure that others here have contributed in very significant ways. So I wanted to take a few moments and hear if anyone wants to share anything about ways that they've contributed this past year to the immigrant rights movement. And also just want to say that, you know, it's been a very stressful year. Maybe for some who consider themselves part of the immigrant community, maybe taking time for self-care and taking time to tend to your family's health, maybe that's how you contributed, and that's a beautiful response. Just wanted to welcome any here. I'm seeing some folks, for instance, from the Welcoming Network. Does anyone want to share a little bit about that? Go for it, Mary. I see your hand.
I'm Mary Reynolds from the Welcoming Network of Santa Cruz, and we have managed to build a very strong but small community, and we're helping 3 immigrants with rent and assistance, with food and healthcare and mental health issues, dental issues, and we're feeling really good right now. We just took on a new woman and her 2 children who had a horrendous story, and she's now safely in Santa Cruz near her uncle, who is her sponsor, and in a comfortable living situation. Thanks to many community members, the Lutheran Church is paying her rent for a few months, and Welcoming Network may take that on at the end of that. So we're really happy about getting going a little, and this has been our dream for over a year, to help immigrants, especially asylum seekers, and it's happening. And we know that it's going to happen a lot more, because now people are coming over the border, and we're learning as we're doing how to do it. Thank you.
Mary, it's such important work and completely volunteer run. So thank you so much for your heart and all those efforts. Is anyone dying to share what it is that they've helped to contribute to immigrants' rights this past year?
I see Richard from Santa Cruz Community Credit Union. Hi, Richard.
I see lots of names on here. I know folks, maybe they're being shy this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Maria Elena. I just want to say one of the things that's interesting shift. We've done a lot of work with all of our members to try to keep them home, doing extensions, really did a lot of work with the PPP program. One of the really interesting things out of the recent changes that needs to get out in the community more is that if you're an I-10 business that has a tax ID number but not a traditional Social Security number or a business ID number, you're now eligible for the PPP funding. We're starting to process our first couple that we've gotten in on that process, but this most recent round of the SBA process has really been aimed at the entrepreneurs and the micro small businesses. And we're really hoping that we can get some outreach to the I-10 based businesses. We have a lot of I-10 based members. About 20–25% of our loan portfolio in consumer lending is to I-10 borrowers. We'd love to see that expand out into the community for I-10 for the PPP process. There's still funding available. It looks like it's going to continue beyond this month, and it'd be wonderful if we could help some more people in that area.
Thank you, Richard. That is such important work to try to remove barriers, right, to access some of this funding that everyone else, Yeah,
because it's been, we, a good example, almost $4 million came in yesterday for members for the, the stimulus program. Some of that is indirectly going to families with I-10s and that kind of thing, but it would have been wonderful if that would have been more available to other folks, but at least we do have this available for the business community.
Thank you, Richard. And I know that just a few minutes of hearing about this could never do justice to all of this amazing work to promote thriving immigrants in our area, but I invite you all to continue sharing proudly any of your contributions in the chat, and we'll compile that together and share back with you all as part of our follow-up as well. I'd like to go ahead and pass it off to Community Action Board's Directing Attorney, Matthew Wisner, as well as Staff Attorney Lisette Rodriguez Peña from Watsonville Law Center, who will be giving us a little bit of a state of immigration in March 2020.
Thank you, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Matthew Wisner. I'm the Directing Attorney at the Community Action Board's legal program, and I'm joined this morning by Lisette, who you met already. She's a staff attorney at the Watsonville Law Center. And we will be sharing with you some highlights of legal developments from the past several months. And we have about 10 minutes. And so we want to give you some of the core information, because the legal landscape, as you may be seeing in the news, is shifting quickly. And we're receiving weekly policy changes from the federal level. And the Biden administration, as you all know, is unwinding and changing many of the previous administration's immigration policies. So with that, I do want to dive right in with a few slides, and I'll turn it over after I share my screen to Lisette to launch us here.
All right, good morning, everyone. So as Matthew mentioned, the immigration laws and policies keep changing every day. And last week, we got some good news regarding the public charge. And I'll just give you a summary of what the public charge was under the Trump administration. So the public charge is an admissibility test that has been used for over 100 years by the Department of Homeland Security. And it's used to decide whether to deny or grant a green card by determining if the green card applicant is likely to become a dependent on the government for financial and material support. So before Trump, they were applying the public charge under the 1999 field guidance that took different factors into consideration, such as your age, your education, your health, and your financial status, to determine overall whether you would be a public charge to the government. However, as we all know, the Trump administration dramatically changed the meaning and the application of the public charge by proposing the new public charge rule in 2019. And under this rule, it expanded the programs that were considered as a public charge by adding supplemental nutrition programs and federal housing, which not only caused a chilling effect within our immigrant communities by discouraging them to apply for programs that they did qualify because they were already legal permanent residents and U.S. citizens, but it also created different factors and barriers for those new immigrants that were applying for green cards. Next slide, please. But good news, I mean, this whole Trump era public charge it started being implemented in February 2020, but there was many legal challenges where courts were granting injunctions and then dismissing injunctions. So throughout all those things, on last week, on March 9, 2021, the Biden administration finally stated that they were no longer defend the public charge rule. The Supreme Court dismissed the government's appeals blocking the Trump's public charge rule. So as of now, we don't have any public charge rule. We still have they still apply the public charge rule that they were applying before from the 1999 field guidance, which is less restrictive, meaning they still take factors into consideration when someone applies for a green card, such as your education, age, health, and finance, but they won't take any factors such as you applying for a public benefit program as food stamps, cash assistance, or federal housing. So those are not on the list anymore. And USCIS has issued a memo stating that they will no longer consider those benefits if they apply for new applicants of a green card. So those are great news under the Biden administration. Next slide, please. Some not so great news is in a way, great news and they're not, because they added other stuff. So under the Biden administration, the deportation priorities changed. So now the Trump administration has declared they will no longer do any random raids or like any random deportations as the Trump administration was doing. but they did focus on 3 different priorities, and those priorities fall under 3 different categories, which are national security, meaning that any individual that participates in a terrorism activity will be automatically deported, or any individual that needs to be deported to protect national security. The other one is border security, and this one in a way it changed because when Biden was elected, a lot of people from Central America started coming to the border thinking like, oh, now that Biden is elected, maybe I have more possibilities of entering the United States. But that actually, it's the opposite. So based on the deportation priorities, now anyone apprehended while attempting to enter the United States on or after November 1st, 2020 will be automatically deported unless they have an asylum claim or other humanitarian reliefs. The other thing is that if they're not physically present in the United States before November 1st, 2020, they would be automatically deported. So that's just to discourage the whole mass of people coming to the border and thinking that because Biden is now elected, they will not be allowed to enter the United States. And the other one, which actually had a lot of change to it, was the public safety category. And under this public safety category, there's 2 different factors that are being taken into consideration. And one of them is that anyone that has a criminal activity that relates to aggravated felonies at any time, or a gang offense, or a 16-year-older that intentionally participated in the gang activity. This one affects our communities the most because they now added gang activities and any youth that participates in gang activities. So that has a big impact in our community. And not only that, but now you also have to meet the fact that if you, other fact that if you're a public threat to the community, that also makes you deportable. And there is different factors that they take into consideration. I'm probably running out of time, so I'll move faster. There's a lot of information to share within 5 minutes. All right, so the other ones are the immigration bills under the Biden administration. And there's 2 bills that they're actually, the House of Representatives will be voting on this today, actually. And those 2 bills, if you could move to the next slide, Matt. And those 2 bills,
Sorry, Lisa, we're having a technical difficulty. I'm going to reshare here.
Okay.
All right, can you see that again?
Yeah, I could see it. Thank you. All right, so the 2 bills that they will be voting on the House of Representatives are the Farm Workforce Modernization Act and then the American Dream and Promise Act. Those 2 bills are kind of components of the main inclusive immigration bill that Biden first introduced and then later became a bill, the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. The Farm Work Modernization Act basically creates a path to lawful status, meaning that it will create visas for agricultural workers currently working in the United States. And then also it would modernize and reform the H-2A, temporary agricultural workers, which are foreign workers that are brought to the United States to work in the agricultural industry. This act seems like it will create some path to citizenship for our agricultural workers, but it actually benefits the agriculture and dairy business. So mostly the employers, not the workers, because it limits, it creates barriers for agricultural workers to actually obtain a green card. So they have to be working in the agricultural industry for more than 10 years to be able to apply for a green card and must remain working in the agricultural industry to continue with their green card. So it's a way to ensure that the agricultural industry has a workforce available at all times. So we still have a lot of work to do. And the other one, the American Dream and Promise Act, also creates a path for citizenship for dreamers, temporary protected status, and then defer and forced departures if they meet certain requirements. But also this one also creates barriers because they have to have the green card. It's a conditional green card for more than 10 years. And then after the 10 years that they have the conditional green card, then they could apply for a permanent green card leading to citizenship. So it also creates barriers for our communities because if within the time that they have the conditional green card, if they ever are penalized for a criminal activity that relates to moral turpitude, that might lead to their denial of the application for a permanent green card. So as advocates, we still have a lot of work to do, and we still have to push forward for this US Citizenship Act to get passed, which is more inclusive. It creates less barriers as it grants citizenship for Dreamers, TPS, and farm workers and others without any conditions. And then it also increases the family-based visas, and it reduces blockage, and it addresses the root cause of migration. So then all those individuals that are coming from Central America, they're actually getting the help in their countries and not forcing them to come to the United States and risk their lives as they cross the border. And as well as it creates new technology and infrastructures at the border. So I know that's a lot of information, but if you have any questions, you could always follow up with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisette. And so now I want to turn to a few other important highlights. As you all know, when the Biden administration took office on January 20th, they quickly launched into several executive orders. And just when we talk about executive orders, I do want to distinguish between what Lisette was just talking about, which is legislation or acts of Congress that have been introduced in order to change the United States laws, the immigration statute. What we're talking about now are regulatory changes and enforcement changes that the President of the United States can direct, which are sort of in between the laws. So a few of the high-level ones that we saw were the end of the Muslim ban, which is colloquially known as the Muslim ban, was really a travel restriction and a visa restriction from many countries in the Middle East and Africa, which was highly prejudicial towards certain groups. It also revoked Trump's instruction to the Census Bureau, which could have resulted in an undercount of immigrant community members in the census. We were very pleased to report that that is not happening. The Biden administration has directed the Census Bureau to make a full accounting in the 2020 census. Another major change was the end of the Migrant Protection Protocol. We've spoken a little bit in today's session about the border and what we're seeing there with an influx of asylum seekers. And the Trump administration had implemented a program called the Migrant Protection Protocol, also known as the Remain in Mexico program, which had caused many asylum seekers, individuals and families to wait their court hearings in Mexico along the border, oftentimes in really unstable and dangerous conditions. And what we saw was a terrible humanitarian crisis. And I personally worked with clients along the border who were subject to this program. And the unwinding of this program is a very, very good thing for the humanitarian legal regimen here in the United States. So you probably recognize this image. The construction of the border wall by the Trump administration has been halted. As you may know, funds have been redirected from other sources, including military and Pentagon and other sources that Congress had designated for the funds in order to build this border barrier. So those funds are intended to be redirected. So the Biden administration asked the Department of Homeland Security to return those funds to the correct source where they were appropriated by Congress in the 2021 fiscal year. So the border wall construction has been paused until that Department of Homeland Security plan is in place. And then, as you may know, over the last several months, the DACA program has been restored to its original state and has been reaffirmed by the Biden administration. So this was a tug of war, wasn't it, over the last several years? You may have heard in the news, you know, the Trump administration is trying to end DACA, and the Supreme Court was issuing rulings, and other federal courts were making decisions. And what the takeaway is that for all of us today is to remember that DACA has been restored to its original policy. The Biden administration has reaffirmed it, and federal courts have upheld it as of December. So what does that mean practically? It means that community members here in Santa Cruz and Monterey and San Diego counties who entered the United States as children under the age of 16 and before June 2007 may be eligible to apply for work permits if they're undocumented. These work permits are valid for 2 years. They come with social security numbers, protection from deportation. They may apply for travel permits called advanced parole in order to visit family members abroad or for other purposes. So DACA is a very important protection right now. It is an interim stopgap protection, and we are still advocating for permanency. But in the meantime, we continue to try to meet the demand for this important protection here in the community. And we are seeing just large numbers of youth who are potentially eligible contacting our offices. And it's something to be aware of in terms of referrals and making sure that youth get linked up with these services. One last point I want to make before we transition out is the naturalization civics test. You may have heard last year that the Trump administration tried to make, well, they did implement a harder version of the United States citizenship civics exam. They increased the questions from 100 to 128, and they made them harder. And USCIS this year, under the Biden administration, determined that that new test created basically barriers to the naturalization process in terms of content and procedures, and they did away with it. So we're back to the old exam. It's 100 questions. You only have to answer 10 of them. And we are very pleased about that. It will reduce barriers put in place last year to becoming a US citizen. So I put up on our screen here the Community Action Board's phone number as well as the Watsonville Law Center. If you have follow-up questions, please do feel free to reach out. And with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker. So we're joined today by Assembly Member Rivas, who is from San Benito County and has represented the 30th Assembly District since 2018. And in addition to pushing for vital legislation that strengthens California's education and environmental protections, Assemblymember Rivas has been a champion for farm workers throughout his time in office. And last summer, I believe he joined the TIC-led community conversation on immigrant advocacy and shared legislation that he proposed, the California Farm Worker COVID Relief Package. And he now joins us to share the results of last year's advocacy, along with current opportunities to support immigrants and farm workers here in 2021. So Assemblymember Rivas, you can take it away.
Awesome, yeah. Matt, hope all is well and really appreciate that introduction. Always great to join you all. I just got done with our session and had an appropriations hearing after, so I ran up here to my office. So I won't take up too much time, but certainly appreciate the opportunity to say a few words and to share this the work that we've done over the last year in really a very challenging environment that we've had to work in, obviously, but it's as many of you know, I represent the 30th Assembly District. It's a large district, represents parts of 4 counties: the county of Santa Cruz, there, the city of Watsonville and the Pajaro Valley, the county of Monterey, which encompasses Salinas and the Salinas Valley, San Benito County, and the county of Santa Clara, which is in Morgan Hill and in Gilroy. And as you know, our region altogether is one of the most productive agricultural regions in not only California, but the entire world. And so for us, we have an overwhelming population of farm workers, of agricultural workers. And so I'm proud to, since I just started my second term here in the legislature, but, having started in the state assembly in December of 2018, I was proud to share my story, having been a lifelong resident of our region, having been raised by immigrant farm workers. My grandfather in the mid-60s, he came to California because this was a state of opportunity where a farm worker could work hard and provide a better life for their family. And that's exactly what my grandfather did. And so I'm fortunate for his sacrifice and having the opportunities I've had. I wouldn't be in the state legislature right now without the sacrifices he made for my family and for myself. And I share my story because, our first year in the legislature, we fought really hard for a farm worker housing bill. We heard a lot about a housing crisis in the state of California when I first started, read a lot about the housing crisis in our state, a lot about housing affordability, but nobody talked about the humanitarian crisis of housing in our region and in agricultural regions, where you have farm workers living in critically overcrowded conditions, deplorable conditions, children and families having to live with complete strangers. It's appalling, and it's something that wasn't discussed here at our Capitol. And so I was happy to share not only my personal experience growing up in farm worker housing and in overcrowded housing by a loving family, but having that housing security over our heads meant everything for myself and my family. But sharing the examples that we see every day in the Pajaro and the Salinas Valley and San Benito County of families living in the shadows, and it just really is unfortunate. So I was proud to, talk to my colleagues about that. And then as COVID-19 started a year ago, I immediately, at the end of, in March of last year, sent a letter to legislative leaders, to the governor's office, talking about what we knew at the time, the impacts that COVID-19 could potentially have on our most vulnerable residents, especially our farm workers. We heard a lot about social distancing, washing your hands, keeping your distance, and we all know those are things very challenging for farm workers to do. Work in close proximity, they travel to job sites in close proximity, crowded buses or carpools, and the way that they live, as I mentioned. And so we started our advocacy with the governor's office early. I was proud last year to introduce a package of bills that we called the California COVID-19 Farm Worker Relief Package. It was the first such package introduced across the country, focused exclusively on supporting our farm workers. And so the marquee bill of that package was Assembly Bill 2043, which was the Agricultural Workplace Health and Safety Act. It passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support, worked closely with a lot of stakeholders. It was signed by the governor. And what that legislation does is it essentially ensures enforcement by Cal OSHA of its COVID-19 guidance. And it does so in two ways. First, it has a funded, targeted bilingual outreach campaign to educate our agricultural workers on Cal OSHA guidance, how best they can protect themselves from this virus at home and in the workplace, as well as educating our farm workers on the rights and the benefits they have related to sick leave, related to workers' compensation. These are things that a lot of farm workers aren't aware of. And so having them have this information is critical. The second thing is our legislation directs Cal OSHA to track and to publicly report workplace investigations related to the agricultural industry. Look, we all know that data is incredibly important for good public policy. And so this data and or reporting requirement will definitely shine a light on workplace issues. And you would think that it would give legislators, it could give relevant state agencies concrete examples, important information related to dangerous workplace issues and problems, and give us the information we need to address these problems and issues, and eventually make meaningful action to improve these workplace some conditions that are very dangerous, and make them safer for our workers. And so certainly another bill that was passed of ours was Assembly Bill 2165. It was around e-filing and Rural Access to Justice Act. And so this was a larger bill, a larger effort that sought to improve access to government and public services for our most vulnerable residents. And these are residents who live in remote or rural areas in regions such as ours and like ours across California. And these are people and residents who have historically lacked equitable access to government services. And so this particular bill expanded the availability of electronic filing to all state trial courts. If you lived in South Monterey County and Soledad and Greenfield and King City, if you had to go pay a court fine, you had to drive to Salinas or Marina. And typically for our lowest wage earners, that meant taking a day off of work. And so what we did with this bill is made it more accessible to pay fines and to do stuff remotely. And so certainly it's a larger effort to really address this issue of equity between urban and rural areas. And obviously broadband plays a very similar role in our need as a legislature to address broadband and trying to bridge the digital divide. Because for us in rural areas, in our region in particular, not having access to high-speed internet, it's been a long-standing problem. This hasn't just become a problem because of COVID. And so the fact that we are receiving the attention and we are addressing it is incredibly important. And hopefully with a new administration in Washington, we can get the support, the resources we need. And then, the fact that we can prioritize it here at the state needs to happen. But certainly, ensuring that our interests at the local level, that they certainly get the recognition and are addressed. Other issues, I think, in addition to the legislation that was passed and signed by the governor and it's now law, we worked really hard, as I mentioned, to address our concerns of this potential virus could have on our most vulnerable populations. And so in the initial letter we sent, and we have sent dozens of letters, and as vice chair of the Latino caucus here in the state of California, I've been very active on our state's response to this pandemic and how we're going to recover. and obviously fighting on you know, in talking about equity from day one now for over a year. But you know, in addition to these bills that were passed and signed, we also worked very hard to formally request executive actions be taken to address some of these issues. And obviously, the highest one was to have the state support any effort to alleviate the critical overcrowding that we have in our region and agricultural regions across California, as I spoke about already on, you know, at the top of this conversation. But we requested in March, in April, again in May, for the governor to invest and to proactively create a program specific to agricultural regions to provide temporary housing for our farm and agricultural workers. And these were efforts, this was nothing new. These were efforts that were made for healthcare workers. These were efforts that were made for our unsheltered homeless populations. So we suggested that, look, the data is key. We know the critical overcrowding. We know we had studies and reports that have been released talking about, you know, in our own region in the county of Monterey, where agricultural workers were three times more likely than any other employee in other industries to contract COVID-19. And it was primarily driven by the way they live in close proximity in these overcrowded conditions. And so finally, the governor, they created this housing and rolled out this housing for the harvest program in July. It certainly happened a little later than we had wanted it to, but at least the request was honored and the program was launched. And they, in the recent budget proposal, they have proposed to reallocate more money to the program, and hopefully our region will see a greater benefit from that program. And then others is obviously very similar requests that we've made to secure agricultural protective equipment and to enable these mobile COVID testing units. And then on the vaccine front, obviously been working very, very hard to ensure that our region receives a fair share of doses for our agricultural workers, for our most vulnerable workers. You know, as I mentioned, as vice chair of the Latino caucus, we've met with Governor Newsom on several occasions. Latinos in the state represent nearly 40% of the population, and Latinos have been hit the hardest by this pandemic, and they have essentially been left behind in a lot of ways when you talk about the recovery or our response, our statewide response to this pandemic. And now as we recover, it's important to look at how we recover through a lens of equity, and that starts with vaccinations. And so certainly we've worked very hard, very proud of the advocacy we've had that you know, directly with the governor and his staff, working with them to this shift of an equity-based system when it comes to the allocation of vaccinations, targeting our hardest hit regions based on this Healthy Places Index. I know that in our own district, we are going to see a benefit from this shift in new doses in the city of Watsonville, in the Pajaro Valley, in East Salinas, in the Salinas Valley. These are the hardest hit regions in the district I represent. And we've had some of the worst outbreaks in the state of California, here in our district, and so certainly addressing that and getting the attention we need, and really appreciate all of the work that's occurred at the local level, creating these collaborative coalitions, laying the foundation, because the logistics are very challenging in reaching our hard to reach populations and reaching our farm workers. Who they never speak up, they never ask for help, and so certainly we're their voice, and you know, we need to work for them, and so creating access to a vaccine is very challenging. And that's why I really I commend all the planning, all the work, Erica, Padilla Chavez, all of you, all of the stakeholders that have been involved. Is been incredible work. This, you know, I could say the same about work that's been done in San Benito County, in the county of Monterey, where in the county of Monterey, farm worker health, there's some farm worker vaccination clinics. I was able to attend the first one they had 2 weeks ago, where they inoculated over 3,000 farm workers. Last week, another 3,000 farm workers. And so certainly it's these efforts where we are not wasting the vaccine, but we're efficiently providing vaccine doses to our most vulnerable populations. And we're meeting the state's expectation of addressing the equity, the concerns that have been raised. And so with that, I think that, in addition to our efforts, there have been other bills that are worth noting. Assembly Bill 3133 by Assembly Member Aguiar Curry. I don't want to get into them because I'll be talking forever. Assembly Bill 2113 by Assembly Member Below. But one bill I do want to highlight is Assembly Bill 1876, which further expands access to the California Earned Income Tax Credit, the Cal EITC. And it really is to ensure that all California tax filers, specifically our undocumented I-10 filers who are otherwise not eligible for the stimulus that has been passed at the federal level, but they are, they pay taxes here in this state. They don't see the benefit of a lot of our government programs, but they will qualify for Cal EITC and for this young child tax credit. And so this specific legislation removes this requirement for an I-10 tax filer to have at least one child under the age of 6 to qualify for Cal EITC. And this was a significant policy change because, according to the data, 97% of children who will benefit are children of color, 90% of them Latino. And so this was a significant bill and will have a significant impact for our undocumented population. And so with that, I think that clearly there's a lot of more work that we need to do. Certainly, we're focused now to work with all of you and to work with a lot of our communities within our district to address a lot of these ongoing problems and concerns. But it's the next step that we're focused on is obviously still trying to mitigate the challenges of COVID-19, our response as a state to COVID-19, but also focused on our recovery as a state and making sure that our recovery is equitable. This is a huge opportunity for us to break down barriers and to improve a lot of these longstanding issues and injustices that we have seen, that we know exist. And so certainly it's important for all of you to continue to engage, to organize, and to educate our local residents and families, our farm workers, on issues that are important to them. Because as I mentioned, all of you, all of us together, we're their voice. And so when there's legislation before us, don't hesitate to reach out to our office, to contact me directly. Just yesterday we had an agricultural hearing. And so we asked a local Latino strawberry grower to join our hearing to share about her experience, the experience of her family. And it was very educational for not only myself, but for my colleagues. But certainly any way that we can be supportive, that I can help, certainly I will. A couple bills that we are currently working on. Assembly Bill 73 is a farm worker wildfire smoke protection act. As we know, our farm workers who have been the hardest hit in this state by COVID-19. And if that wasn't enough, we had a historic year for wildfires in our region, in our state. And with that brought more toxic and unhealthy air quality days that we've ever seen. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a shortage of protective equipment. So we had farm workers that didn't have the appropriate masks, didn't have the appropriate equipment to protect themselves. And because they're low-wage earners, because a lot of them were undocumented, they didn't complain. What they did is they continued to show up to work. They continued to, make money for their families because they had no other choice. And so what our bill would do is it would do three things. It would essentially require immediate deployment of specialized strike teams from each Cal OSHA regional office. So if there's a day in our region of unhealthy air, they would deploy to our region to assess the situation and to help workers and employers address the unhealthy, or their ability to work in such conditions. And so with that, this legislation requires a stockpile, that the state stockpile N95 masks. So that way, if we won't have these issues of shortages where agricultural workers will not only get educated on protections and the importance of health issues related to inhaling toxic smoke, but that they would have the resources available to have those masks. And then another one really quickly is Assembly Bill 125. It's a $3 billion general obligation bond that we've proposed. If it's passed, signed by the governor, it would go to the ballot in 2022. But what its intent is to accelerate our economic recovery while combating climate change, improving food security, and protecting our essential food and farm workers. And so this bill or bond is about creating a more resilient, a more sustainable, and a more just food system here in California. And this is important. It's an important statement. It's an important movement because California is the #1 ag producing state in the country. And so we lead the way in agriculture, but we need to improve our food system. And so there's 4 pillars of accomplishing this that we have proposed, how we're going to allocate this money. One of the pillars is seeking to invest in our farm and agricultural workers, in our farm workers. And we propose this by allocating millions of dollars to the construction and development of safe, dignified farm worker housing units, addressing critical overcrowded some conditions. We have proposed millions of dollars in the acquisition of personal protective equipment for our farm workers, such as N95 masks. And then also we've proposed $100 million of this potential bond money to provide and promote public health for farm worker families who lack access to safe and reliable drinking water sources. It's unacceptable that millions, hundreds of thousands of residents in the state do not have access to clean water. A lot of them are our most vulnerable, are our farm workers, and that is unacceptable, and it's something we've got to fix and address and change. It's something that our former state senator Bill Monty spent years championing, but we need to pick up the fight, and we need to continue to work to address it. And so with that, obviously access to healthcare, overcrowded housing, the digital divide, we could certainly be, I could be on this call for a long time, but really appreciate the opportunity. Sorry it was a lot, but happy to be with you this morning and really appreciate all the work you guys do.
Thank you, Assemblymember Rivas, for your leadership, for your work. Please know that we stand with you and you have our support in moving forward and lifting up these important issues. I want to thank you for joining us, and I apologize to everyone. I know we're a little bit over time. However, these are a lot to talk about in an hour and a half. So we appreciate you staying with us a little longer. Thank you to all who have written questions in the chat. We will do our very best to work with Assemblymember Rivas's office and see if we can address some of your questions and get back to you on some of the things that you all have put on the chat. I want to, just thank you once again. Thank our partners, our community members for joining us this morning. Thank you for your conviction, your leadership, for responding really from the heart to ensure that we are taking care of our community and making sure that the undocumented community is not left behind and has access to critical resources. The organizing and crisis response that has taken place, not only at the nonprofits, within the nonprofits, philanthropy, our local government, grassroots, and everyday people is really humbling and gives me hope. But as you all know, this is only the beginning and a lot of work needs to continue. We invite you to stay engaged and informed. Join us as we continue to advocate for equity, dignity, and immigrant justice. We will be sending additional information for some follow-up conversations taking place in the next couple of weeks. We're hoping to launch a Cal EITC for service providers and for our community, and some additional resources that we're hoping to get going in the next couple of weeks and months. So please stay tuned. And once again, thank you for joining us today. Muchas gracias.